So, Joseph Parker has been busy on social media this week. He's the gift that keeps on giving, to be honest. I am very much enjoying these call-outs. We've seen a few of them now.
Yeah, he's the people's champ, isn't he?
Yeah,
he's
he is,
very humble, good laugh. And more importantly, he's like not the most gifted of all the heavyweights. And the fact that he's still finding a way to make a fight of it, to stay relevant, to keep challenging fighters who potentially, we thought his days were over. When he was destroyed by Joe Joyce, there's no way, I thought in a year or two's time we'll be talking about him fighting Anthony Joshua. But now we are.
It's crazy. Do you know what you say about when he was beat by Joe Joyce? When he had the back-to-back losses against Anthony Joshua and Dillian Whyte, it wasn't I thought he would retire. I didn't think that he couldn't be in competitive heavyweight fights. But I thought that the days then of us talking about Joseph Parker as one of the guys at the top of the division that could seriously threaten any fighter around the top of the division, I thought those days were gone. So to have the comeback he's had is pretty phenomenal. And now we're at a point when, if he calls out the likes of an Anthony Joshua, an Oleksandr Usyk, Tyson Fury, that's a bit of a no-go for Joseph Parker and his team. But if he does call out any of these guys, we're not sat there thinking it's just a PR stunt. We're literally thinking that he could have a good chance in these fights.
It has to be taken seriously. He has to be taken seriously. And look, I've said before, the Usyk fight with him, because of the style of Parker, I think he could match up quite well against Usyk. I'm not saying I think he beats him, but just to be able to keep up with Usyk as a challenge, and he's one of the few who might be able to give him a little bit of a challenge in that sense. And with AJ, I think AJ's in such a great spot right now where he's climbed the mountain again. He's ready to go again. I'm kind of reluctant because I'm thinking, all right, I do believe he'd beat Parker, but it's not something that's an easy thing to do. And if you're his manager, you're thinking, fuck me, is it worth risking everything with a guy like Parker who doesn't know when he's beaten?
When in the heavyweight division you do get fighters that have second comings, that have another roll of the dice, often you'll see stylistically they'll change a lot. I think back to the Klitschko's. Vitaly a lot less than Vladimir, but definitely with Vladimir, when you see him take a couple of losses, stylistically he changed so much. And when we look at the potential of, let's say, a Anthony Joshua against Joseph Parker rematch, I just think we'd get such a different fight now because both fighters are in such different phases.
It wouldn't be boring.
No way.
That last one could have sent a glass eye to sleep.
Oh, it's horrible.
This one, they're both going for it.
So the first man that Joseph Parker called out was Dillian Whyte. Yeah. That was a very good one. That was he had a bit of take that plan, which is one of my favourites. He calls out Dillian Whyte. That was a couple of weeks ago now, maybe 2 weeks or so ago. If that fight was to happen again, do you think straight away that's the sort of fight that could go straight on a Saudi pay-per-view card? Could it headline, or would it need to be part of one of these stacked undercards?
My first thought is, if this was in the UK, and maybe a Sky card, I don't think that's pay-per-view anymore. I think Dillian Whyte's stock has dropped significantly, and as much as Joseph Parker is in the rebuilding phase, even in that last fight, he wasn't the main event. So I think, on a Sky card, it would be the headline of a non-pay-per-view card, for example, or a DAZN card, something like that. I don't think it's quite enough. And I think that might be the reason why Parker might end up the bridesmaid and not the bride here. It may be that AJ and Dillian cut him out of the deal and go and do a deal themselves.
Sometimes
that was what was supposed to happen, right?
Well, yeah. Sometimes in boxing, I look at things and I think, okay, you don't always have to avenge a defeat. Like, there are circumstances where sometimes a fighter didn't go back. Let's say, for example, David Haye, right? He was beat by Thompson, was it? I think early on in his career, didn't go back and avenge that loss. And obviously, it was fine in the end. It wasn't like he needed to. There's been other examples of guys that have been beat, haven't gone back to avenge the loss, but have gone so much further on in their progression than the guy that beat them, you almost don't need to go there. Does Joseph Parker, for anything other than his own pride and his own sanity, and to be honest, his own, what's that word? I'm trying to search for that word. Closure. Apart from his own closure, does he really need to entertain a Dillian Whyte fight?
Or a Joe Joyce fight?
No. Is he called for that one as well?
No, but I'm thinking Joe Joyce decimated him. Like, that wasn't a defeat, that was a destruction. That's something where if a man beats you like that, I feel like as a fighter, you'll probably want to get that one back.
Can I tell you the problem? This will sound mad. This will sound like another mad take that I'm giving. I think Joe Joyce probably does the same to him again.
Why?
Because that fight was not a fight that was won on technical ability. And sometimes we were talking earlier on off camera about nature. I feel like what happened in that fight was nature. That's what I feel like, though. I don't feel like
nature just took its course.
Do you seriously think that their fight being won by Joe Joyce was a result of sharply refined skills that he's been drilling over in the gym? Or do you think it was a case of Joe Joyce going, you are a big guy, I'm a big guy, I hit hard, you hit hard, let's see who has the better chin? Because that's how it felt like to me. Work him down and break him down.
Okay. But you're contradicting yourself ever so slightly because, I mean, not necessarily, but Parker, the new coach, and you've been waxing lyrical about what this coach has done with him, and he's transformed him as a fighter. And it does feel like we're looking at a new and improved Joseph Parker. And what we also are looking at is an older, more damaged Joe Joyce. And if you do want to get that get back, you really want to do it when a guy's been absolutely beat the shit out of by Zhang. So if you want a fight that's just ticking, it's clear that Parker's in a situation where he's like, I just need to tick over because I'm waiting in the wings for, he's last in the queue, right? You've got Fury versus Usyk to be settled, then AJ versus the winner of that to be settled, and Joseph Parker in his head's thinking, once you three are done, then I get the winner. That's a long time to fill.
Yep.
And if I'm going to fill that time up, I really don't want to fill it up with guys who are a serious threat to me. Now, I think AJ is a threat worth taking because the money's big. Dillian Whyte, he's obviously confident that Whyte isn't what he used to be, so therefore it's a threat worth taking. Get back. And I think that Joe Joyce could be the third in that list of, he's been decimated now. Is that chin going to hold up the way it used to after he's been knocked out like that?
If I am Joseph Parker, do you know what fight I am edging towards the most? The Dillian Whyte fight. Because the Dillian Whyte fight, stylistically, the way the styles match up is such a winnable one for Joseph Parker. Dillian Whyte, I'm not saying he doesn't have that physical strength, but he's not really able to impose it as much. What Joe Joyce had, and what Joe Joyce still probably has, is he'll never spike in intensity, but he can keep that level going through so well. Whereas
He's
Dillian,
like an elephant, isn't he?
that's it. It's exactly it. Whereas Dillian Whyte will very much spike in intensity, and when he comes back down, he don't really want to be getting hit then, and the powers of recovery aren't as good with Dillian Whyte.
Dillian Whyte's not the last fight that he just come back to, but the one before. The guy who AJ beat. What's his name? The American?
Franklin.
Franklin gave Dillian Whyte problems for the same reasons Joseph Parker would probably knock Whyte out, possibly. Like, there was a moment where I thought Whyte was in real trouble in that fight, and I think Parker's better than Franklin.
I've never really thought about it, but stylistically, they're actually very similar.
Yeah,
Parker
that's what I'm saying. Like, they fight in the moving in and out. They fight on the outside quite well. They can fight inside. Like, I think they're all really well-rounded guys, them too. So,
And Franklin was very much an opponent against Dillian Whyte, whereas Parker would have a full camp. He might even be the A side on the bill. I think that Joseph Parker, looking at the Dillian Whyte fight, that will be the one that he wants to go for more, because when you think of it as scratching an itch, I believe the itch is a lot more stronger with a Dillian Whyte fight than it is with a Joe Joyce fight, because in that Joe Joyce fight, Joseph Parker was stopped. He had moments of success, but it never really looked like he had wobbled or rocked Joe Joyce. If the Dillian Whyte fight against Joseph Parker goes on for an extra 10 seconds, you would say Joseph Parker wins that fight via stoppage. So I think that that's one that he'll be looking at, and he'll be going, back then, 5 odd years ago, I was good enough to beat you. Now I'm definitely good enough to beat you, because Joseph Parker's career is sort of aging like a fine wine, and Dillian Whyte looks like it could be sort of on a downwards.
What happens if AJ gets there first and they make the deal to fight Dillian Whyte to keep him ticking over? What does Parker do then, though?
If AJ was to fight Dillian Whyte.
Yeah, I think that's a real possibility, because AJ needs a dance partner, but he doesn't want anything to fuck up the Usyk versus Fury winner. So it needs to be someone he knows he can beat, but he also needs to have a draw so he can bring money in. So that's a no-brainer. So if it happens, which was supposed to happen before, Parker's in a fucking situation where who do you go to then?
I think, listen, obviously we've heard about the Zhilei Zhang rematch happening, and this is one of the things that this is one of the things that I love about having the Saudis in boxing. I love a rule being bent here and there, and when I look at the Saudis being in boxing, although Joseph Parker against Zhilei Zhang for sort of hardcore boxing fans, a very intriguing fight, very interesting fight, it wasn't the most entertaining fight. But barring the knockdowns, Joseph Parker against Zhilei Zhang, I didn't think was that interesting. It did sort of go the way, barring the knockdowns that I thought it would. And that's why when the Saudis have looked at the fact there's a rematch clause there, I think they've just started exploring other options because they are actually in touch with the fan base and they know what we really want to see there. I don't really want to see a rematch between those two guys. If it was there and you said, right, them two are boxing tonight, yeah, I'm watching it. But if you said, okay, there's alternatives, there's different options. We're hearing about Zhilei Zhang against Deontay Wilder. That's something I'd love to see.
That feels like it's getting closer from the reports.
Yeah.
There's always the X factors, people like the Andy Ruizes you could throw in there maybe, but
that's the weird one though, isn't it? That's the one we haven't heard about the rematch talk, and obviously Joseph Parker won that points decision against him, so that's one that could definitely be revisited. Andy Ruiz, we know that he's probably not, in fact definitely not going to come in to a fight like Joseph Parker. That would probably be suicide off the back of the inactivity. Yeah, that's it. So out of the fights, I think that Joseph Parker should be looking to try and get that Anthony Joshua fight. I think that I've said this a few times. I've said this on this channel and come under a bit of stick. Anthony Joshua's going to lose one of his next 2 fights, I think. I think Anthony Joshua's going to lose again very soon. That is not...
Who do you mean in regards to the winner of Fury Usyk?
I think if Anthony Joshua's next 2 fights were Hrgovic and then the winner of Fury Usyk, I think there's a chance he loses one of those. I think there's a strong chance he loses one of those fights.
Do you think he loses to Hrgovic maybe?
I think there's a chance. I think there's a lot stronger chance than people are thinking. I just look at heavyweight boxing, and again, when I say he loses one of the next 2 fights, that's because I understand now that the days of fighting Helenius and Jermaine Franklin are in the past now. Yeah. Anthony Joshua will be in blockbuster fights from now until the end of his career, and when you're in those sort of fights, you're going to lose fights. So when I say Anthony Joshua, in my opinion, will lose one of his next 2 fights, that's not to say that if I then laid out his next 5 fights, he wins 4 of them and just loses one of these 2. What I'm saying is, it literally is a case of snakes and ladders in the heavyweight division. Anyone can lose to anyone. So I do think that that's on the horizon, possibly. For Joseph Parker, he definitely does need one of these bigger names, I think, next, because you can't really sell, as good as it would be for the hardcore boxing fans, you can't really sell him against Ajit Caballero or the Frank Sanchez winner in that fight and expect it to be a pay-per-view attraction or even a main event attraction on its own. So very, very interested to see what we get next from Joseph Parker.